There is a number sitting on your birth certificate right now that is worth more to you this year than almost anything in your bank account. It is not your pension. It is not your savings. It is not how many years you clocked in at work. It is the year you were born. And most Canadians over 60 have no idea that number is doing something to their money every single year, whether they notice it or not. Here is the part that should stop you cold. An old age security is not one flat check that shows up at 65 and just sits there forever. It moves. It changes shape at 60. It changes again at 65. It changes one more time, quietly, at 75. And somewhere between 65 and 70, there is a single decision that is worth more to your retirement than any other choice you will make this decade. A decision that can grow your income by more than a third for the rest of your life, or quietly cost you thousands if you get it backwards. And then there's the one nobody warns you about, a single income number sitting on one line of your tax return that can reach back a full year later and take part of your OAS away after the money is already spent. 5 lines. Your birthday is walking you across every one of them right now, today, whether you're paying attention or not. And the system was never built to tap you on the shoulder and tell you when you've crossed one. It was built to assume you already know. I want you to actually feel why this matters, because this was never really about percentages on a spreadsheet. For a senior living check to check, being on the right side of one of these lines instead of the wrong side is the difference between a winter where the heat stays on without a second thought, and a winter where you're standing in the kitchen doing math between the hydro bill and the grocery bill. It's a payment you were owed for years finally landing in your account, or one that never shows up because nobody ever told you to ask for it. This is your security. This is your ability to stay in the home you've lived in for decades without lying awake over it. And it all turns on lines that most people never even realize they're crossing until it's already too late to fix cleanly. So today I'm going to hand you the whole map. No fear-mongering, no the government is hiding this from you nonsense, just the 5 lines, the real 2026 numbers, and the exact move to make at each one. By the end of this video, you'll know precisely what your birth year is doing to your money at 60, at 65, in the deferral window, at 75, and at that clawback line near $95, 000, and you'll know it well enough to act on it this week, not someday. Before we start, a quick honest word. I'm not a financial advisor and I don't work for the government. What I do is take the maze of rules Service Canada and the CRA publish in 50-page PDFs and turn it into something a real person can actually use over a cup of coffee. Nothing here is a secret. It's not new. It's not some overnight law designed to catch you off guard. These are ordinary, built-in milestones that have quietly existed for years. The problem was never that they're hidden. The problem is that nobody hands you the map, and the system will happily let you sit on the wrong side of a line for a decade without ever picking up the phone to tell you. If you're over 60, or you have a parent who is do me one favor before we go further, stick around to the end, because the 2 lines that matter most, the automatic 10% raise at 75 and the $95 000 clawback that catches people a full year after they've already spent the money, are coming up, and they're the 2 most people miss completely. And if you know your province, drop it in the comments, because a few of these numbers shift slightly depending on where you live. Now let's walk your birth year across all 5 lines, starting with the one that arrives 5 full years before most people think anything even begins. Quick self-check. Find your line before we go deep. Here's the fast version so you can place yourself. In 2026, born around 1966, you're crossing into the age 60 line right now. The allowance window just opened for you. Born around 1961, you're at 65. OAS and GIS begin. Born between roughly 1956 and 1961, you're inside the deferral window, the 65 to 70 stretch where the biggest decision of the 5 lives. Born around 1951, you're turning 75 this year and crossing into the automatic 10% raise. Hold on to your number. As we go through each line, you'll know instantly which one is yours right now and which ones are still ahead of you. Line 1. Age 60, the bridge nobody mentions. If you were born around 1966, you're crossing this line right now, and most people cross it thinking there's nothing to do until 65. That assumption alone can cost a low-income senior thousands of dollars. Here's why. Between 60 and 64, there's a benefit that barely anyone talks about, called the allowance. If you're in that age band, your income is modest, and your spouse or partner already receives the guaranteed income supplement. You may qualify for a monthly payment designed to bridge you to 65, and it can be worth well over $1,000 a month. There's also a version for people in that same age range who've lost a spouse, called the allowance for the survivor, worth up to roughly $1,600 a month for a widow or widower on a low income. None of this is automatic. Almost nobody is told it exists, and every single month you qualify without applying is money that's gone for good. It doesn't bank itself for later. Picture a man named Robert, 63, who lost his wife 3 years ago. He's living on a modest workplace pension, still 2 years from his own OAS, watching every dollar carefully because that's just what you do at that stage. He assumes there's simply nothing for him until 65, because that's what everyone always tells you. And for 3 years, he's been quietly eligible for the allowance for the survivor, potentially over $1,000 a month, and hasn't claimed a cent because no letter ever came and nobody at any counter ever mentioned it to him. That's not a rare story. That is, without question, the single most common way real money gets left on the table in this country. A low-income senior in their early 60s who genuinely believes the system doesn't start until 65. The move, if you or someone you love is between 60 and 64 and getting by on very little, especially if a spouse has passed or is already on GIS, don't wait for 65. Check the allowance now, and if you think you've already missed months of it, ask anyway. Some of it can still be paid retroactively. Line 2, age 65. The front door, born around 1960. This is the big one. This is where old age security itself, and for lower income seniors, the guaranteed income supplement actually switch on. The full OAS pension at 65 in 2026 sits at roughly $740 a month, and it's adjusted every 3 months to track the cost of living. Here's the mistake that catches so many people right at this door. A lot of Canadians assume OAS simply starts on its own the month they turn 65. Sometimes it does. Service Canada does automatically enroll some people and sends a letter, but not everyone gets that letter. If you don't, and you don't apply yourself, the payments simply don't start. Nobody chases you down about it. The onus is entirely on you. The move, the month you turn 64, log into your My Service Canada account and check whether you've been flagged for automatic enrollment. If you haven't, apply directly, ideally a full 6 months before your 65th birthday so there's no gap in your income. And if you're on a low or modest income, apply for GIS at the same time because it doesn't come bundled with OAS automatically either. It's worth understanding why GIS trips people up so often. Unlike OAS, which is largely based on how many years you've lived in Canada, GIS is income tested and reassessed every single year based on your tax return. That means it isn't a one-time application you file and forget. If your income drops in a given year, your GIS can go up. And if it rises, GIS can shrink or disappear entirely. A lot of seniors apply once at 65, get approved, and then assume the amount is locked in forever. It isn't. It moves with your tax return every July, so filing on time every single year isn't just good practice. For a low-income senior, it's the single thing keeping that supplement flowing without interruption. Consider a couple, Margaret and William, both turning 65 this year. William gets the automatic enrollment letter because Service Canada already had enough information on file to trigger it. Margaret, who spent several years working part-time and filing slightly differently, doesn't get flagged. If she assumes we're a household so we're covered, she can go months without her own OAS starting, even though her husband's began right on schedule. 2 people, same age, same household, 2 completely different outcomes, because the system checks each person individually, not the family as a unit. Line 3, the 65 to 70 deferral window, the decision that outweighs all the others. This is the line I want you to slow down for, because it's the one decision inside this entire map that's genuinely worth more than any other. You don't have to start OAS at 65. You're allowed to defer it, delay taking the payment for up to 5 years, all the way to age 70. And for every single month you wait, your eventual payment grows by 0.6%. Stack that up over 5 full years and your OAS payment is permanently 36% higher for the rest of your life than if you'd started at 65. That's not a small bump. On a payment that starts around $740 a month at 65, deferring to 70 can push it well past $1, $000 a month, and that higher amount is what you'll receive every month for the rest of your retirement, indexed to inflation on top of that. But, and this matters, deferral isn't automatically the right call for everyone. If you're relying on GIS because your income is low, deferring OAS doesn't grow GIS the same way, and you'd be going without both payments for however long you wait. If your health means a shorter retirement is a real possibility, waiting 5 years for a bigger check you might not collect for as long isn't obviously the smart move either. This decision has to be made on purpose, weighed against your health, your other income, and whether you actually need the money now or can genuinely afford to wait. Think of a woman named Carol, 65 this year, still working part-time, with a solid workplace pension already covering her basics. She doesn't need the OAS check right now. For her, deferring even 2 or 3 years is close to free money, a guaranteed permanent raise for doing nothing but waiting. Now think of her neighbor, Frank, also 65, living paycheck to paycheck on a modest income with no other cushion. For Frank, deferring could mean real hardship today in exchange for a bigger number tomorrow that he might struggle to enjoy the way he wants to. The move. If you can comfortably wait, even deferring for a year or two is a real permanent increase to your income for life. If you need the income now, taking it at 65 is not a mistake, it's the right call for your situation. Either way, make the choice on purpose. Don't let it happen to you by default just because 65 is the number everyone talks about. There's a middle path a lot of people don't realize exists too. You don't have to choose between start at 65 inches and wait the full 5 years to 70. You can defer for exactly as long as makes sense for you, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever fits your actual life. Each month of waiting adds its own 0.6%, so even a partial deferral banks a partial permanent raise. The math doesn't require an all-or-nothing decision, even though it's often presented that way. Take a third case, a man named Harold, 66, who was laid off from his job at 63 and has been living on savings and a small severance ever since, waiting to see how things shook out before deciding what to do about OAS. He's now a year into being eligible and hasn't touched it, simply because he never got around to deciding. That's the one pattern to watch for. Deferral by accident isn't the same as deferral by choice. If Harold genuinely doesn't need the money, drifting into a deferral works out fine. But if he's quietly burning through savings faster than he'd like while a payment sits unclaimed, that's not a strategy. That's just a form nobody filled out. The difference between those two outcomes is a single conversation with Service Canada to confirm what he's actually doing and why. Line 4, age 75, the raise almost nobody checks for. Born around 1951, you crossed into this line this year, and here's the good news, this one is automatic. At 75, OAS increases by 10% permanently. On top of the regular quarterly cost of living adjustments, this is a separate one-time bump baked into the system specifically for seniors 75 and older. The problem isn't that this raise doesn't happen, it's that almost nobody actually checks whether it landed. People assume the number on their statement is correct because it's the government, and they never compare it to what it should be. Every year, seniors who turn 75 quietly go months without noticing whether the higher amount actually showed up. The month you turn 75, or the month a parent does, pull up the OAS statement and confirm the higher amount is there. It should be a straightforward comparison against what you were getting the month before. If it isn't reflected, that's a phone call to Service Canada worth making immediately, because this is money you are simply owed by turning 75. There's no application required, just verification. Line 5, the $95,323 clawback, the trap that shows up a year late. This is the line that catches careful, responsible people, and it's the one that makes this whole system feel unfair when it hits, because of how it's designed. If your net income for the year climbs past $95,323, the 2026 threshold, the government begins clawing back your OAS at a rate of 15 cents for every dollar you go over. Here's the cruel part. This doesn't show up on your OAS statement. It's calculated quietly based on line 23600 of your tax return, and it very often doesn't hit you the same year you cross the line. It shows up as a reduced OAS payment a full year later, after you've already spent the money that pushed you over. The classic way this catches people is a single big year. You sell a property or pull a large lump sum out of an RRSP or RRIF in one go, and your income spikes over the line for just that 1 year. 12 months later, your OAS quietly shrinks, and you have no idea why, because nothing about the timing connects the two events in an obvious way. Picture a man named David, 68, who finally decides to redo the bathroom he's been putting off for a decade and pulls $35,000 out of his RRIF in one lump sum to pay for it. His normal income is comfortable, but nowhere near the threshold. That one withdrawal pushes his total income for the year past $95,323. He does the renovation, enjoys the new bathroom, and moves on with life. A full year later, his OAS checks start arriving smaller, month after month, and he genuinely cannot work out why. No letter explained it. The recovery tax simply reached back and took its 15 cents on every dollar he went over. If David had instead taken $17,500 in December and $17,500 in January, the exact same money, split across 2 tax years, he likely would have stayed under the line in both years and kept every dollar of his OAS. The move. If you're anywhere near that $95,000 line, never pull a large lump sum in a single calendar year if you can spread it across 2. Look at pension income splitting with your spouse. Moving eligible income onto their return can pull your individual number back under the threshold. And most importantly, know exactly where that line sits before you make a big financial move, not a year later when the reduced check is already in your mailbox. It also helps to understand what counts toward that number in the first place, because it isn't just your paycheck or your pension. Net income for this calculation includes RRSP and RRIF withdrawals, investment income, rental income, and capital gains. Basically, most things that show up on your tax return, not just your regular retirement income. That's exactly why a one-time event like selling a cottage or a rental property can trip this line even for someone whose everyday income is nowhere close to it. It's not about being wealthy year-round. It's about any single year spiking for any reason at all. And once the clawback applies, it isn't a one-time hit that resets itself automatically the following year either. Service Canada calculates a recovery amount based on your prior year's tax return and then deducts it from your monthly OAS payments throughout the following payment year, from July to June. So a high-income year doesn't just cost you once, it can quietly reduce your check for a full 12-month stretch. And if your income comes back down the year after, the reduced payments only correct themselves once your next tax return is processed and reassessed. That lag is exactly why so many careful, well-organized people still get blindsided by this line. It doesn't punish you in the moment, it punishes you on a delay, which is precisely what makes it so easy to miss the connection. What actually changed in 2026? Two things specifically. First, the dollar amounts themselves went up because OAS and GIS are indexed to inflation and adjusted every 3 months, so the figure on your statement today should be a little higher than it was a year ago. If it hasn't moved at all, that alone is worth a phone call to check on. Second, the old GST credit that many seniors receive alongside OAS has been renamed as of summer 2026 to the Canada Groceries and Essentials Benefit. Same program, essentially the same money, new name on the statement. I mention it only because a familiar benefit suddenly appearing under an unfamiliar name causes a lot of unnecessary panic. Nothing has been taken away, it's simply wearing a new label. If you think you've already missed all of this, here's the honest truth, and it matters more than any number I've given you today. It is very often not too late. The allowance, GIS, and even OAS itself can, in many cases, be applied for late and paid retroactively, sometimes going back months. The door does not slam shut just because you didn't know it was open. The single worst thing you can do here is assume you've missed it and never ask. The single best thing you can do is check. Your 3 moves this week, whatever your age, here's the shortest version of what to actually do, starting this week. 1. Pull up your most recent OAS statement or log into My Service Canada account and simply look. Confirm what you're being paid, and if you're 75 or older, confirm the higher amount actually landed. 2. Make sure your most recent tax return is filed. Your GIS, your allowance, and most of these benefits are switched on by that one document. If you've fallen behind, catching up is the single highest value phone call you can make this month. 3. If you're near any of these edges, approaching 60, approaching 65, weighing a deferral decision, planning a large withdrawal, or sitting anywhere near that $95,000 income line, do the small bit of homework or make the one call to Service Canada, before the birthday or the withdrawal, not after. Nearly every painful story in this entire area comes down to someone who found out a year too late. You now have the map, so that doesn't have to be you. One last honest note, this is general education, not personal financial or benefits advice. I don't know your income, your age, or your household situation, and these thresholds are indexed and shift every quarter. The figures here are accurate as of summer 2026. Always confirm your specific numbers with Service Canada or a qualified advisor before making any real decision, especially around deferral, where your own health and income are the whole story. I'll say one more thing before we wrap up, because I think it's the part that actually matters most. None of these 5 lines are complicated once someone actually draws them out for you. The allowance is just a bridge for a few years. The front door at 65 is just 2 applications instead of 1 automatic one. The deferral window is just 0.6% a month, multiplied by however long you choose to wait. The raise at 75 is just a number to double check twice a year, and the clawback is just a threshold to keep in the back of your mind before any big withdrawal. The reason this whole system feels overwhelming isn't the math, it's that nobody ever sits down and walks you through it in order, in plain language, all in one place. That's the entire gap this video was built to close. If someone in your life is coming up on one of these birthdays, a parent, a neighbor, an old friend living on OAS, send them this today. Most people have never once seen their own retirement laid out as a simple map like this. You could be the reason someone you love finally claims the allowance they were always owed, catches the raise at 75, or times a withdrawal so the clawback never touches them at all. Tell me down in the comments which of these 5 lines you're closest to right now. I read every one. Take care of yourselves, keep that tax return filed, and I'll see you in the next one.